What if burnout wasn't a problem to fix, but a signal guiding you toward deeper alignment with life? The Practice Podcast invites you to explore how aligning with your energy can transform your connection to yourself, your relationships, and your work. Through real stories, data-driven insights, and life-centered tools, each episode helps you tune into your body's signals and create life-affirming change from the inside out. Welcome to the Practice Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Practice Podcast. I'm Jessica Corbin, and today we are running a segment that we call Practicing With, where we're starting to invite on leaders in the regenerative business space to really understand how they are weaving energetic literacy into what they are building, in addition to growing their offerings in a regenerative way. And today, I am so grateful to introduce you all to Amanda Cross Gerber. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jess. It's
So
an honor.
Amanda and I met here at Moss, which is an incredible co-wellness and co-working space that prioritizes decompression. So anybody that kind of is working from this space, you kind of can feel is probably cut from a cloth that values things like nervous system health. And Amanda is extremely magnetic. We met in the kitchen and started talking about a variety of things, but I don't think we moved from our position probably for about 45 minutes in the kitchen, just kind of locked in, went deep, and we're like, I think you're my people. And at that time when we met, you had been in transition, and then the transition that has continued to take place since. I would love for you to share and talk about, because where you arrived is in a consultancy called Wild Order, which I am just goo goo gaga about. I just love what you have created and align with it very, very deeply. So if you could just kind of share that evolution, because you were working in more of a startup world. Yep. And now have evolved the ways in which you work. So please feel free to unpack your journey.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that you just, mentioned that moment in the kitchen. I was just sharing about it as I stepped into the kitchen. It was really a really impactful moment in my journey. And I'm just so grateful to you and the inspiration that you've brought to my creation process over the last year or so. But yeah, it feels like my whole life and career have been spent in understanding organizational dynamics and relational dynamics in the workplace. So I got my degree in organizational studies and then spent about 12 years building and leading in hyper growth startups in the health and wellness space. And all of my friends during those 12 years were also in that space. So I can't even tell you how many hours I have logged thinking about how do these cultures work and how do we make them work better, and really what is happening, like what is actually happening in the work that we're doing. And when I look back early in my career, I really defined my own success by my ability to check the boxes. And I checked them really well and really fast and quickly. But as I evolved, I went through this huge internal shift where I stopped being so fed energetically by checking those boxes. It wasn't giving me the hit of energy that I used to get from it. And all of a sudden, I realized that, for me, what it meant to grow in leadership and what I wanted to see in the environments around me was really more about how did I make people feel in their work? Was I excited, and were the people working with me excited to log in the morning? And really that, I think, is driven by the human connection that we have in our work. And the pattern that I kept seeing time and time again in these startups is that the moment that trust and human connection breaks down, leaders will move to constrict and control. And literally in many of the environments that I was in, and what I was trained to do was in uncertainty to treat a team like a machine. And this is where I would see, daily stand-ups with the CEO or micromanagement of tasks at the very minute level. And the second that happens, you feel like a cog in a wheel. And motivation is zapped, connection is zapped. So I felt this, and it really was the environment that I was raised and groomed in. And then I started to feel like, wait, there's got to be a different way to do this. And that's the conversation that you and I had in the kitchen. I was like, there's something else that I want to unlock here. And I don't know what it is because I've never seen it before. How do I find it? And I actually myself had started working with some energetic models that I had started to integrate my menstrual cycle awareness, human design, and I had started to see in myself the ability to be a different leader than I had seen before. But really where you met me was actually I was coming out of a phase where I myself had become the constricted, controlling, back channeling, micromanaging leader. And I was really trying to figure out, okay, I know that I have been able to do it differently. But I also know that I too am susceptible to falling back into that way of being and conditioning. And so what is it about what do I need? And my boss actually, to his credit, asked me, Amanda, on a deep energetic and emotional level, what do you need in order to not show up in this way in your work? And the answer that I gave him was, I really don't know. I don't know what my own needs are in order to be the leader that I want to be. And so that moment in the kitchen was really an unlock for one of the key tools that I then dove into to try to make sense of what are my own needs? What is my role that I'm here to play? Not just the functional role on my job description, but how am I here to actually make people feel? And how can I be seen and valued for that in my work? And so my self-exploration through regenerative principles and through the system of human design led me to create the framework that became the foundation of Wild Order, which is really about how do we understand that role that we're here to play, what we need to ask for from the people that we're working with in order to step into a more embodied form of leadership, and how our differences actually support us in working and building together.
And I will tell you all that going through the experience of a Wild Order assessment, and it's very light in terms of the effort that the participant needs to make. I didn't really have to make much effort in order to get a ton of illuminating feedback about my unique function. If the pursuit is to make individuals, teams, and organizations more frictionless, assessments like this are just super helpful. And it feels like I was unwrapping a present the whole time. It just felt like, oh, I get to learn this about myself, and this about myself, and this about myself. So going a little bit deeper in terms of how you organize it, so that I'm just talking about from a firsthand experience that it's awesome, but why don't you take people through a little bit more of the philosophy and the output, like what people can expect to walk away with?
Yeah. So there are two kind of core aspects of the Wild Order framework. The first is, what role are you here to play in the ecosystems that you're a part of? That might be, we focus on work, but it applies to every other ecosystem in your life. So some people are pioneers that are here to break new ground and overcome challenges. Some people are anchors that are here to ground and stabilize their environment. And other people are are connectors that are here to really weave that interstitial tissue of the organization. And so people will walk away first and foremost with an understanding of what is that emotional, energetic role that I am actually most naturally here to play on any team that I'm a part of. And then the second piece of the framework is your energy type. I call it your force of nature. So there are 5 forces of nature that kind of mirror the different ways that our energy ebbs and flows. And so it really gives you a tool for understanding, okay, am I someone who's more like the wind, where my energy comes and goes in these kind of longer, more sustained flows? Or am I more like the river, which is constantly running that same path every day? So it gives you a tool for understanding, okay, what am I here to do in the team? And how can I actually use my own energy to best play that role?
Mm-hmm. And where do you see kind of sources work in energetic literacy? How has that influenced any ways in which you were thinking through wild order? Does it have a natural kind of connection point in your eyes? I mean, I have my perspectives, but
I mean, absolutely. First of all, I think when I first heard the term energetic literacy, it was this huge light bulb moment for me, because what you've done, and therefore what you really have inspired and empowered me to do, is said, these things that we are feeling in our work, but haven't had the ability, the support, the framework to name, it's actually really important and can be directly applicable to business that we do that. So it's really like, I know in my body that some things light me up and other things drain me. I know I don't have the same amount of energy every day. But to actually have the language that is shared language on a team to be able to talk about that, for me, was this aha moment of, wow, I can add value to teams just by giving that shared language, even as a first step. And I think where there's really strong interplay between the information and the language and the data that Source is giving, right? Wild Order is kind of saying, here's what role you play. Here's how your energy wave works. And then Source comes in and says, and here's where you are on that energy wave. Here's how much oomph you have to put towards that role on any given day.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful interplay because, again, you have this, what would we call it? Like this metaphor of this ecosystem for people to click in on and then live into. If we don't have the right metaphor, we're screwed. If people think business is war, it's a very different experience than, if business is a harmonious ecosystem.
Yeah. Or we think about things like, I love Myers-Briggs. I love Enneagram. But if I tell you a random number, like letters and acronyms, you can't feel that in your body. If I tell you you're an elephant.
Which I am. I'm an elephant.
And I'm a dolphin, which I am. I can feel in my body what it means to be a dolphin and what it means to be an elephant.
Well, why don't you go ahead and describe what a dolphin is?
So a dolphin is, my role in an ecosystem is to be a connector, right? Dolphins are known for the social intelligence and their overall reliance on their pod as the key driver of their life. And they're also really fast. They're like the wildfire. They can leap from one place to another.
They're also very sexual.
They're also very sexual and highly communicative, both of which I am.
And then can you go into explaining the elephant?
Yeah.
Not as sexy on the face, but I will tell you, I can relate, especially in regards to the pursuit of Source.
Yeah. So elephants, when we think about elephants, they're the symbol of regality, of the matriarchal presence and steadiness. Elephants are here to anchor and ground any ecosystem that they're a part of, and they walk with that really consistent, grounded, diligent focus towards their vision and towards supporting their herd.
It's so fun. It's so fun. So I think one thing that I really appreciate is that your story is the story of many, but you are doing it, I think, a little out in front than most. So it's like you have the story of many, which is, this current system isn't really working for me. It's turning me into somebody that I don't recognize, right? And you somehow, though, had the certain type of courage that enabled you to take a bigger leap, not without consequence. We know that there are consequences. So can you just speak into a little bit about that, like, real life consequence, benefit and consequence of being a change agent in the way that I think you are?
Yeah. I gotta think about where to start with that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I think I'll start with the benefit.
Okay.
I think the benefit is that when we step boldly into being a change maker, all of a sudden, especially on the entrepreneurial path, every moment of work, every task in work feels like it is actually contributing to my becoming the person that I want to be. It's like, oh my God, of course I'm going to spend all day, thinking about this question or putting something together for a client that's going to help them evolve as a team and connect as a team more deeply than they ever could, because I then get to become that in myself. In doing that, we are literally writing a whole new language. And so for somebody who was very comfortable in the world that I had been brought up in, there were really very few tasks that felt like, wow, I don't have a way to think about how to start that or to think about how to talk about it. Whereas it's almost like I've gone back to being infantile in some ways. Like I don't have the words at the tip of my tongue like I do if I'm talking about OKRs or a project plan or building some model within operation. So can I step into a phenomenal amount of vulnerability and uncertainty in terms of the work that I'm doing and also my life. And there's real financial insecurity that comes up when we step into entrepreneurship in a bold way. But I think having the time and the privilege to be able to evolve myself and to watch the world around me evolve as I commit to this purpose is really worth that every day.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I feel the gravity of your choice, but I also feel very compelled to give the full view for anybody that is wanting to do the same, that it's like there's nothing more that I personally want to do, being on the front lines of creating regenerative change or shifting the paradigm.
Yeah.
But there's also real life consequences that some have the privilege to shoulder and others probably can't.
Yep.
And I am one of those people that is privileged enough to take the headwind of whatever resistance people have when we talk about regenerative change.
Yeah.
And I also found, and I've shared it with you, that as an entrepreneur, if you can, give yourself more time.
Yeah.
uh, come up with some sort of plan that allows you to secure enough financial health, and then cultivate enough discipline to continue to work on the side hustle until it becomes the main hustle. Then you can also create like such tremendous impact. If you don't have that plan that is very tactical in the ways in which you're going to provide for self as you build, the engine while it's in flight, or swap the engine while it's in flight, then it won't, you won't have as much impact as you want. So to have that plan is really important.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah.
How are you? What's the reality of that for you at this time?
It comes and goes. I'm somebody who, I literally built a career on being able to bring discipline and rigor and accountability to teams, and to do it for myself is so much harder. To be able to move from I'm in creative state thinking about what animal matches, the energy of a particular element, to then being my own chief of staff. I feel my energy for that ebb and flow. So I have some systems now that are set up that make me feel like, okay, I've got this. I have a coach that I work with who helps to remind me. I have check-ins that I do each week with my own financial plan to make sure that I'm on track. But it took me time to put that structure in place for myself.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. The reality of it too. Let's go into a little bit of visioning before we round out today. And 2 questions. The first question: what happens if leaders don't embrace? What do you think happens truly if leaders don't embrace? How would you put it? How would you put the problem? We say embrace these regenerative principles. Maybe for you, it's if they don't embrace nature-inspired leadership.
Yeah. And really emotionally intelligent driven leadership, if we can't bring the way that we feel, not just our minds, but also our hearts, not just structure, but also intuition. If we can't bring all of that into our work, what happens? What happens?
What do you think happens?
Well, I think we all know that the tectonic plates of what it means to work and how we work are shifting drastically around us. And I think in terms of teams, there's going to be 2 things that happen. Either we continue to see huge rounds of layoffs and teams get way smaller, or we just start with much smaller team ecosystems. And so what that means is you either have people who are looking around and saying, wait, I was here because I had all these people, all these bonds in my network, and now they're not here anymore. Or you have people who are reliant on a far smaller number of people in order to find fulfillment and belonging and purpose in their work. So I think people are going to be turning to their leaders through more uncertainty than we've seen before and saying, wait, what am I still doing here? How do I find the role that I am meant to play as my job description change, as the people and the support systems around me all change? And so I think you really start to have a crisis of purpose and meaning and belonging, and therefore, retention, and people starting to look elsewhere unless their leaders can show up and make them feel seen as a whole person and really valued, not just for those boxes that they check, but for the other energetic, emotional contribution that they're making to the space.
Do you think leaders like the idea of needing to be more for people?
I think leaders really want to.
Okay.
I think a lot of them know that they need to be able to meet their people in this way, and they really don't know how. So they don't really want to look at it or talk about it because, wow, if I have data that shows me my team is super burnt out, or I've had a conversation that shows me this person's role is kind of out of alignment with what they're here to do, now I have to actually deal with that. So yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, we get the feedback often of that leaders are so overwhelmed that they can't, by the idea that they need to be more for people. That's why I always talk about that we have to go for systemic changes so that it doesn't feel like the load is resting on the leader's shoulders, but that everybody is bought in to actually systemically running the company in a way that is so much more energetically literate, where if we really look at the goal of the company is to increase performance, energetic literacy is the way to increase long-term performance. And it's just about, I think instead of the leader thinking, oh, I have to be more for people, them realizing that there are just one part of shifting the culture that then can support the whole in a way that doesn't require them to, again, take the headwind all the time.
And I also think just like when we think about, stepping into entrepreneurship doesn't have to be black and white.
Yeah.
Integrating regenerative practices into the way that you lead within an organization also doesn't have to be like we're going from 0 to 100 overnight. There are ways that you can integrate these practices in bite-sized pieces that still add, I think, a lot of value.
I agree.
Yeah.
So take us out in possibility. What is possible, do you think? And maybe even give us some timelines. I just want to know kind of what lives in your dream space. What is possible when people learn to be both energetically literate and think and build ecosystemically?
Yeah. So I envision a world where people really come back to feeling like work is a sacred calling, whether they are an entrepreneur or not, that they can find that within their work in organizations. And so I think we move away from the severance model of, work and life as totally separate, and we move back to seeing work as a place where we find deep personal purpose and deep communal belonging. And there have been moments in my work where, even without the language and the frameworks of regenerative principles, where my relationships, my chemistry, my bonds with people have given me that. So I know it's possible. It doesn't feel like we're talking, far on the horizon. I think it doesn't take huge shifts. It really can happen incrementally, that you're starting to cultivate deeper human connection to yourself, and therefore are available to connect that in with the people that you're working with.
I love the ease that you are dreaming us into. Yeah, that it can be not such a big lift, but rather it's one choice to reconnect with self and then live in that energetic integrity, and a lot of things will fix or realign so that life happens on its own rather than being so gosh darn effortful. I appreciate you. I appreciate the chance to get to know you and experience your work. So thank you for coming on our podcast today. And thank you all for tuning in to this edition of the Practice Podcast, Practicing with Amanda Cross Gerber. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Jess.